Hi everyone, welcome to our episode 9 of Beyond Labels. Today with us is Clare. She is an advocate for people with disabilities. She's many things, so I need help with a description of the roles that she has. So she currently is a co-chair of National Autism Strategy, Deputy Chair of the Western Australia Ministerial Advisory Council on Disability, Executive Member of the Commonwealth Disabled People Forum. And what is more important for this podcast, she is DFES, Department of Fire and Emergency Services, volunteered and lived experience co-researcher of the University of Sydney. Today, she will talk about emergency plans and recovery for people with disabilities. It is important because whether you care for someone with disabilities or live with someone with disabilities, or you are a person living with disabilities, we need to be prepared. So she will tell us everything about how to get prepared, what are the questions that we need to ask, who needs to be involved for all emergencies and disaster, not only for the floods and fires, but there's many things that we're going to learn from Clare. So welcome to our episode 9 of Beyond Labels, where every story is an amazing story. Hi everyone, welcome to our new episode of Beyond Labels. Today with me is Pam, our Pam that you all know. And also we have another special guest today with us. We're going to talk about a very interesting topic. So Clare, welcome.
Hello.
Clare Gibellini is an independent advocate, community preparedness and recovery. She's also a volunteer for the Department of Fire and Emergency Services, a co-chair of the National Autism Strategy, a deputy chair, Ministerial Advisory Council of WA, and a new task that you took on because you have enough free time, executive member of Commonwealth Disabled People Forum.
Yes.
Right.
That's a few of them, yep.
Do we continue?
No, we'll be here the whole podcast and it's not that interesting.
Today we're going to talk about something that is actually really, really important for everyone that lives with disabilities and their families. It's the person-centered emergency preparedness. So you, Clare, you participated in this research.
Yep.
Tell us about everything.
Tell us about everything. Wow. Yeah. How long is this podcast?
I want to start at the beginning.
How did I start?
It's really important. So,
So how did I get started? So I, in 2022, I found myself for the first time at the United Nations in New York. And
You found yourself.
I found
there.
myself. I'm still not quite sure how I ended up there, but somebody said yes, and that's where I was. And I spent probably the first 2 days waiting for the tap on the shoulder for someone to go, actually, you're not supposed to be here, but that was all good. And one of the themes for that conference was around disability inclusive disaster risk response. And it's not something that I had a lot of involvement in before, but it kind of really piqued my interest because I was with a lot of advocates who were from the eastern states who had just been through all the big bushfires and the floods and all of that sort of stuff. So I started to really think about what my involvement was and how our community here in WA was engaged or not, as the case turned out to be. But the big thing for me was I got a little bit lost. I don't know if anyone has ever been to that building. It's the most confusing building you've ever clapped eyes on. And found ourselves, myself and one of my fellow advocates, we found ourselves in a side event, which is like a conversation and presentation about the Ukraine. And the war in the Ukraine was 4 months in. And the day before, half of Pakistan had gone underwater. So it was a really big topic of conversation. Anyway, this woman, some people from the Ukraine were in the room, and then there was some people on the phone as well. And this woman in particular dialed in, and I'll never forget it as long as I live. She was talking about how people with disability were obviously experiencing a lot of really awful stuff, which I won't talk about here. I think everyone can imagine. But she also started talking about how we were part of the response and relief efforts. And that really surprised me. And she was talking about how people who had been left behind were taking shelter in hospitals and doing things like preparing and delivering meals, getting theatre packs ready, and, doing all those sorts, and sitting with people and helping people. And even she was talking about a couple of folk that had modified vehicles, so they were loading up and driving supplies to the troops and doing all these kinds of really amazing things. And she was talking about all of these things, and you could hear the bombs going off in the background. I'll never forget it. And I thought to myself, well, if they can do that in those situations, there's got to be something that I can do at home, where we obviously don't have those sorts of situations, but there's got to be something that I can do to help. And to, and it also, I found it really challenged me in a lot of ways. So I wanted to learn more about it. So I came back to Australia, full of fire and wanting to learn more and wanting to talk to people. And then in September, myself and another fellow advocate, Andrew Fairburn, here in WA, we went to a ministerial conference in Brisbane, and we met up with a whole bunch of folk. It was again focused on disaster preparedness, and disability or people with disability were included and a really important part of that conversation, and that's something that I'd never seen before. And so we went to that, and we met a whole heap of folks from Queensland, and QDN, and from the University of Sydney, who developed the PSEP process. Mm-hmm. And it's just kind of grown from there. And then I'm a very curious person by nature. Also talk quite a bit, you might have realised, but I have this, belief that for all of the barriers that we might face as people with disability, the people working within those systems, and those systems themselves have barriers too, and so I wanted to know what they were. And so I signed up to be a DFS volunteer and learn how the system works from the inside out, so that I could better support my community who were saying to me, well, why doesn't this happen and why doesn't that happen? And I really enjoy being a DFS volunteer. I love it because sometimes the advocacy work that I do can take years to come to fruition, and this is a way of helping our community immediately. But yeah, that's why I'm here, and then spend a lot of time going through with the PSEP stuff, and myself and Andrew run a small group, a community of practice that we're trying to grow over here, and started working for the university, and loved every second of it. So it's become a huge part of my life, but I think it's really, really important, because I think, if you look at some of the statistics for our community, things are pretty dire. And so I really want to help as many people be as prepared as possible.
So I read this, the research that you did in conjunction with the University of Sydney, and is person-centered. Can you share with us what does it actually mean for people with disabilities?
Yeah, so the course, the person-centered emergency preparedness, like workbook and resources and stuff, were actually prepared by people with disability for people with disability. And
what better way to get information?
Well,
right?
hello, exactly. I know, it's this revolutionary idea that we know what we're talking about. Weird, I know. But one of the things that I think is really important about PSEP, and there's a lot of there's a lot of tools out in the world, right, around emergency preparedness. DFES has got one, Red Cross has got them, but this is the one that I love because it actually drills down really deep into a person's life and looks at all of the different aspects. But I love it too because it starts from a strengths-based. It looks at where people are right now. Where are they connected? What assets do they have that they can draw on in those, and it shifts that conversation away from we're a problem to be solved to us being part of a solution. So that's one of the reasons why I feel so strongly about it. It looks at a whole of life approach. So it looks at your current living situations. It looks at the assistive technology that you have and you need, and how you use it. It looks at things like your health management and medications and stuff like that, mobility and transport. How do you communicate? How do people communicate with you? So it's really, and then there's that whole social aspect as well, because that's a really important part of recovery. So that's what I love about it. And the other thing I love about it is that it's not here, just fill in this form and off you go. Mm-hmm. The final part of PCEP is communicating it out and communicating with other people what your plan is and when it needs to be enacted and all of those sorts of things. And it gives people, I believe, once they've done it, through a series of conversations, not just a one-off sit down and fill out this form, it gives people a really strong sense that they've got a little bit of control over what might happen in these situations. And, from personal experience and from the work that I do, I know that actually leads to really good outcomes in these situations for people, because they're not feeling helpless, they're not feeling disempowered. I mean, we have enough of that in our everyday lives. We don't need to feel in these situations as well. And the other thing that I think is really important, both within PCEP but also as a message, too often when people say, well, what will you do in an emergency? We'll say, well, we'll call 000 and we'll go to an evacuation centre. Okay, so 000 is chronically under-resourced. There's lots and lots of barriers there, particularly if you're a person who doesn't use verbal communication or, because that's a whole nother episode, I think. But, also evacuation centres, and they're not necessarily built for people with disability. I would struggle in one. I'm autistic and I've got ADHD and a few other labels. That would be the last place I would want to go to. Right, because it's sensory overload. It's physically, oftentimes they're difficult to manoeuvre around. They're noisy. They're crowded. People are highly stressed, highly elevated. If you require certain things, they're probably not going to be there. So it gives people the ability to prepare to do something before, other than those sorts of things. And I don't say that to shock people and scare people, but.
It's the truth.
It's the truth. And the reality, if you look at the statistics, we're 4 times more likely to die or be injured in some of these emergencies. So if we can help people and prevent that, that's really good. And the other thing too is if people are empowered, then their road to recovery is a lot faster as well, because they're prepared. They take the things that they desperately need and that they can't live without. They've got all of the information that they need. They've got all, they know who their doctors are. It's all written and communicated out. And so that leads to a much better recovery and a faster recovery in the long term.
Yeah.
So my question is...
Yes?
Going one step back, it all sounds amazing, putting into a plan in place. Yes. But then what constitutes as an emergency? So that's an interesting question, because even I think about what I know now versus what I knew when I first started. And I used to think about the big things, fire, floods, those sorts of things. But it can be anything. It can be a storm that cuts your power out. It can be obviously those big things like fire, floods, and even down to tsunamis and stuff like that. Them, right?
Well, no, we can't dismiss them. Earthquakes happen in WA too. But it's things that may not even be directly happening to you. It can be supply chain issues. So if there's a flood and the rail is washed out, and that's how certain things like medication and things like that are delivered to WA. that can be cut. So then you have to sort of prepare for that. It can be power outages, long-term, short-term. It can be heat waves. Obviously it can be pandemics. We've all still reeling from that one. But, it can be a health emergency for yourself. It can be, if you're injured, just you, something happens. Lots and lots of things can be an emergency. There's 28 identified hazards and emergencies that DFAS and other government systems use. But for us, it can be all those extra things as well. It can be, if your support service shuts down or can't get staff, that could be an emergency because it could take time to get things back up and running again. So that's what people have to...
And if you're somebody with significant disabilities,
it's huge.
You need support to shower or wwhatever in the morning and get their meals in the morning, then that's a huge impact.
Yeah, that's right. I have ADHD and the medication shortages have had a massive impact on me. Luckily, I had prepared for those sorts of things, but that's an emergency for a lot of people. If you think about if you rely on that to stay employed and stuff like that, it's pretty huge.
That's interesting because anybody thinking just fire, flood, whatever, there's the biggest ones, but when it comes to medication and a person's their own safety and health.
Yep. And one thing that is hugely underestimated is heat waves. And we had a lot of heat waves over the summer here in WA, and we will get more again. That's just welcome to climate change. And I don't say that lightly either, let me tell you. But, a heat wave, if you've not planned for it effectively, it can affect people in so many ways. People with a disability who rely on, temperature regulation to stay well, or their medication needs to be stored at a certain temperature, or and people don't even think about the impact on assistive tech of heat waves. So your battery life is hugely reduced. So those are we have to plan for those as well.
Medication is a huge one. Because not everyone takes the importance of keeping the medication under 25 degrees in a heat wave. And sometimes it's not that you don't know, it's just it slipped your mind and you don't think about it.
So, no, absolutely not.
Another thing that I found really interesting in this is the participation of the community in your plan. Because it's not about just doing it yourself and having it there, but if you don't talk with your close community, then it's not going to actually work for someone with disabilities that lives by themselves or...
And that's the last part of developing that plan is communicating it out. And one of the things that it looks at is how can you become more involved and more connected with people around you. And that's another way that people are kept safe, because they're connected. People will remember, I have a really good story that I can share, that I have permission to share it, but a really good friend of mine is deafblind and she's a lawyer. She works from home and she lives in a suburban area. And that's something else that's really important. People think if I live in a metro area, I'll be all right. No, 95% of WA is bushfire prone. So that ain't the case. Anyway, she lives in a suburban, highly populated area, and there was a bushfire. And the evacuation notifications went out, but she's deafblind, so she didn't hear them. She was home alone. It's only because she was connected to the local political party that went, oh, has anyone thought to get her out? And they came and knocked on the door. Otherwise, she would have still been in the path of the fire, kind of thing. And that's why, that's an example of why community connection is so important. And it's that belonging and inclusion. It's not just for that feel-good stuff. It's for this stuff too. It's for the serious moments. If you can get connected and communicate your plan with your local brigade, then they're aware, and you're in their minds when there's an incident. If you're, if you communicate your plan with a GP, then they could have supports and things in place to know that oh, such and such has got medication. Are we looking at that? Are they okay? Are they safe? Who's checking on them? Those sorts of...
Yeah, exactly. And when you have people with disabilities and then you work with the therapist or the people, the care team involved, they should know as well, especially if there's support workers involved. They should know the importance of acting on an emergency plan.
Yeah, absolutely. And what I love about that I've seen in the past happen too is where people have developed plans and they've communicated with their support organisations. So I know of a couple of organisations in the eastern states whoever is like the on-call person for that organisation today, the first thing they do when they walk in the door is check the weather reports and the emergency warnings now. Right? And then if they see that and if they see that there's a heightened risk, they start calling all of those people who are going to be at risk and getting them know. So it's like that phone tree system.
Yeah.
So that's a huge change because we've had conversations about plans and emergencies and the impact on individuals. And what I really love about PCEP as well is it is so completely individual. Yep. And communicating it has so many opportunities for connection. So
where does the responsibility lie of creating this plan? Does it lie with the person or does it lie with the service provider?
Do you know, I think it lies with all of us.
Yeah.
I do. I think it lies with all of us. And, it's broader than just a person who receives NDIS supports. Yeah. Right? I think that there's a role for the individuals to play if they are able, if they have that capacity. And I believe that because it's very empowering for that individual to feel like they've got control.
Rather than somebody coming in and
saying this is what you'll do when.
Yeah. And they say, well, actually, that doesn't fit my life.
Well, it doesn't work for me, right? I'll come back, remind me to come back to that. But, I think there's responsibility for local governments who provide community services. I think there's a responsibility for the disability ecosystem. So it's registered providers, non-registered providers. But I think that, just as good humans, the responsibility does lie with all of us to support people to get connected. And what I love about PCEP, yes, it was designed by people with disability for people with disability, but it actually fits anybody. Right? I know of very high-level DFES staff members who have used PCEP to develop their own plans. You guys should have your own PCEP plan because, you need to be prepared for stuff. I mean, technically you could say the responsibility really does lie with the individual and their families. And then if you look at the quality and safeguard stuff, then there's responsibility that you have as registered providers have. But I like to take a bit broader than that. Yeah.
It's especially because I have a child within the spectrum. Mm-hmm. If there's an emergency, which we had once, and we had to evacuate, everyone needs to know, but he needs to understand what's going on. Mm-hmm. Then anyone start panicking, and then I'm gonna lose my toys, I'm gonna lose my technology, my house, and all of that. So communicating with everyone is essential.
Yeah.
So have you seen an efficient plan, a good plan that someone with disabilities have?
Lots.
Yeah?
Yeah, loads. And they've been, sometimes we come up against it where people sort of want to build one once something has happened because it really brings it home to them. I mean, slightly less so in the eastern states where most of the disasters and things are happening, but, it's increasing here. But, there's lots of examples of really good plans. And to come back to your point about, the person's plan being reflective of them, one of the really good plans I know of, there was a gentleman in the eastern states who has lots and lots of assistive tech, right? So he's very immobile from the neck down sort of thing. And all these people were like, oh, well, if there's an emergency, you need to get this piece of equipment out. You need to get this, you need a semi-trailer to get all of his AT out. Whereas for him, when he went through this plan, he said, actually, the only thing I really can't live without is my pressure mattress, my alternating air pressure mattress. I can cope as long as I can be in a bed where I'm not going to get bed sores and things like that. And so that's another good example of why the individual has to be involved, because your therapist will be worrying about the manual wheelchair, the electric wheelchair, the shower, the bed, blah, blah, blah. And he's like, all I need is my alternating air mattress, throw that in the back of the car and me along in the vehicle with it, and off we go, and we're right. So, some of those things, that's where you see the really good plans.
Yeah. So,
sorry, I do talk a lot.
No,
I warned you.
we wanted to hear you. You do worked in this one, so you have the information. So, what's the main purpose of this?
Of PSEP?
PSEP.
Yeah. So the point of PSEP is to do two things. Of course, it's to get people ready.
Yeah.
Of course, that's the point. But it's also to start conversations and set people off on a path where, like, it's strength-based, that they're empowered. It's not the sky is falling, you need to do this. It's not shocking people into action. It's about having really good, really robust, really real conversations about what might happen to people, and to give people that sense of ownership and control over those situations, because if you're you think about two sides of the coin. If you know when you've got to go, you've looked at the evacuation centres, or someone's had a conversation with you about the messaging that's coming through. Right, I'm not comfortable. It's time to go. I know that I've got to leave earlier because no one will be able to come in and get me, which I'll explain a bit more in a minute, versus someone who goes, oh my God, I've just got this message, someone needs to come and get me now, and I don't know what I have, I don't know where anything is, I'm not prepared, vastly different outcomes, right? So it's about empowering and putting the power back in the hands of the individual and their families, and there's a little element of inclusion in there as well. I'll always push for that. But
it's allowing the person to understand that they're not on their own. If you're involving the community, if you're involving family, friends, their support network. Yeah. It said, okay, well, if an emergency does happen, we can.
This is
help.
what will happen.
This is
who will be there to help you.
Exactly.
That's right.
We have seal houses, and we did this emergency plan.
Yep.
And it's a lot of work involved, and involving the families, as you said, it's really important, because they knew that we had a box with medication and all the essentials ready to go. That we would check in every so often to see if their medication was still.
That's a big one you have to do, because people make these boxes up and then they forget about them, and 3 years later when something does happen, it's all out of date.
And another comforting toy or whatever they were using, they need comfort, because it's a very stressful situation. Even when you try to keep everyone,
you could have all the best plans in the world, it's still going to be stressful.
So it's really, really important. So the other thing is, I know that the safest thing to do is leave, not stay and defend.
Yeah.
I know everyone takes that as an option.
Yeah, that's true.
What would be the recommendation there?
Oh, look, I can't tell people what they would ultimately do. We know that people choose to stay and defend when they have animals that can't be moved and things like that. We know that people choose to stay and defend when that they might not be aware of the severity of what's coming and those sorts of things. Personally, for me, I feel very fortunate that I've come across this, that I have a good plan, that the things that are absolutely I cannot do without are actually stored somewhere else, not in the risky area in which I live. We as a family, we've sat down and we've practiced and we've planned and we've gone, well, what can we not live without, and how do we make sure that that's available and shiftable, or if it can't be, how do we safeguard it to stay on the property? But ultimately it's down to looking around the dinner table as our family and going, what can't we live without? And that's each other. And ultimately, that's what we want to keep safe. Oh, and the dog, even though he's cranky. But
the dog's family.
He is family. Oh, man, sometimes he's the only person I like in the house. And that's the reality of the conversations. What can you live without? What can't you? What would you why would you stay and defend?
Yeah.
But I get why people do. And part of the PSEP planning too is what to do with your pets, because actually, unless they're assistance animals, you can't take them to evacuation centres, and that prevents people from going.
Exactly.
So, those are all of those kind of conversations.
So we're going to add the link of this information in our podcast when we put it out there, so people can start reading, and also information about how to start your emergency plan.
Yes.
And you mentioned as well you are a volunteer for DFS.
Yes.
How can people get involved? How can people get information? Because I read that there are workshops for carers that can do to start doing this, to start the conversation.
To start getting their plans ready.
Exactly.
Yeah, so there's a few of us that are trying to work on getting those things happening. So I guess that one's a bit of a watch this space, and if anyone's watching and wants to support us to do that, because it's all volunteer led, we DFS are actually really on board with PSEP and are encouraging people to use it as well. I think as support coordinators, I think one of the things that you can do is have conversations at planning time with people. One of the things that we talk to people who have NDIS plans about is when you prepare for your review your PSEP plan, right? Because
things might change.
Things do change. Your support needs change, or that who's providing those supports can change, all those sorts of things. So make it a regular live document. But in terms of, we don't have any sort of PSEP workshops, but we're hoping to deliver some webinars and do a bit more work on that in the future. So
you'll have to let us know.
Yeah, absolutely, we will. We'll get you involved. But we did. Andrew and I did a webinar last year with AtChat, and that's on their YouTube. That was specifically focused on assistive technology and PSEP. So more things will come. I mean, you can download the resources for free from the website, and it is actually quite a self-explanatory.
So what if someone was to create their own plan?
Yep.
And with the help and getting a few people involved, and they're going, I'm not sure about who could they go to sit down and get help with reviewing it.
The really great thing is that a lot of people here in WA have done the facilitators course.
Yes.
So you can email the university and ask to be connected to a facilitator, which that's really, I think, hugely valuable. And a whole bunch of those folk are actually people with disability as well. So I don't know anything about prosthetics and people who are amputees, but that's Andrew's gig. He knows all about that. He's a single limb amputee himself, so we try and sort of fit people in where they can. I'm quite happy to have conversations around a whole bunch of things like intellectual disability and autism and all those sorts of things, because that's where I work. Do you know what I mean? So yeah, it's there's more of us out there, and more people all the time are wanting to become facilitators and involved in this, which makes my heart very happy.
We will look into it. It's important for us
people
to
know.
Exactly.
Right?
Well, and even for yourselves, I think when you're, as service providers, and I say this to any service provider, when you're developing your own business continuity plans, PSEP has to take a part in that as well, because like I said to you before, I've seen a lot of business continuity plans where if there's an emergency, we'll call 000. Okay, except if everybody's calling 000, that's not necessarily going to help. And I know you've got to do things like data and storage and all that kind of stuff as part of your business continuity plans. But if it comes down to keeping people safe, which I like to think that that's why most of us get involved in this sector, because it's not necessarily for the giant paychecks. We care about people, and we want people to be safe, and we want people to live and survive and thrive. So
you certainly got me thinking, because if I think about my disability and my hearing and all the paraphernalia that comes with that, I'm thinking, I've got it spread across the house at the moment, so if there was an emergency, I would have to really think about where things were to put in a bag.
Yeah, exactly. And if you think about even just things where you don't have to get out, like heat waves, how's that impacting it if where you're storing it?
Yeah.
All those kinds of things. What would you do if it was damaged or lost?
It'd be stuffed.
Yeah, and what I love about PCEP too is it again, it's all back down to what the person can do. So, if there's a situation in your suburb and there's a fire and you're evacuated, well, the chances are your GP's evacuated and your chemist is evacuated. And so it might not be that you can go to those people and get repeat scripts. Like I've got ADHD. I can't go to a different chemist.
Yeah.
Because my script has
really
to
strict,
stay
isn't it? Yeah.
with the chemist that I dropped it off at.
Yeah.
So what's my backup plan, right? So, yeah, that's why I think it's really powerful.
Yeah.
I could talk about this stuff
thinking,
all day. You might have picked up it. I'm pretty passionate.
But it is. I mean, because when there's not an emergency, then, we don't think about it.
And that's exactly when you should be thinking about
Exactly.
it, right?
Yeah. Exactly.
Because trying to build a plan where there's ash falling on your roof, it's not the best time.
It's not.
So think about it now and be prepared. And you know what? It would be wonderful if you spent all that time and it didn't happen.
Yeah, exactly.
Fabulous.
Exactly.
I would, when we talk about service provision and the NDIA, I'd love to see them start, and I'm having conversations hopefully with them about this, fund hours in people's plan to put plans together, because it isn't a 1 hour conversation. It's an in-depth, involved series of conversations. So, let's get real about keeping people safe.
Yeah. Well, we're not going to start talking about NDIS.
No, we're not going to talk about NDIS today. But, in any when foundational supports come out or whatever the future of disability looks like, let's get real about these plans.
Yeah. And it's at home, shared houses.
Yeah.
Aged care. People who are homeless, people who have transient populations, people who are just socially isolated from different things, and it doesn't always have to be huge high-tech solutions either. Like I know our street's got a WhatsApp group so that if something happens, we can message each other instantly. Because the other thing people think about is if there's an emergency, I'll grab my stuff and go, which that only works if you're at home.
Yes.
Right, and because what people don't also realise is if an evacuation is called and streets are blocked off, you won't be able to get home to get stuff because it won't be safe.
Exactly.
And your support workers won't be able to get in.
Oh, gosh,
so
there's so many
things about it. Exactly, and this is why I talk about it all day long. But, we can avoid all of those situations if we're prepared.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we're going to put all the information there.
Yeah.
And links for starting the plan and information about this and where to go, where to look and how to start and who to check with, when it's all done.
Yeah, it's really important for anybody, I think. Yeah.
So,
talked a lot about it today.
That kind of got us quiet. We need a plan.
We need a plan.
Yeah.
We need to check if
we need to do things.
But you know what? Fabulous.
Yeah.
Because that's the whole point of this conversation, is that if people just think about it and start taking baby steps, it's better than nothing at all.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that's how you keep people alive.
Yeah, exactly. So, and what would you say is the first point to start?
The first
create
point?
the plan. Yeah.
So go on the website, download the PCEP plan, and have a look through all of the different elements, because whilst it covers all of those areas, there might be areas that doesn't matter to you. Like assistive technology is not something that I have to worry about, but it's very different for me. For you, exactly.
Yeah.
So, and start from that strengths-based point one, which is what do I have right now? What are the things that I can do really well? What are the things that I have access to? What are my strengths? Because once you start doing that, you start looking at it from that positive empowerment point, rather than this is really bad and we have to get ready because nobody's coming. Well, start from the strengths-based. This is what you can do. This is what you have power over. This is what you have control over, and go from there. Yeah. It does get people thinking.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah, we've had people who are working in emergency services who think they're incredibly well prepared, going, "Oh boy, I didn't think about that." So yeah.
So we worked with our participants to win their plan. You know, this, and we have one as well here, but it's so important to have people starting on that. Just download this. We're gonna put all the information. Start reading it. Start the conversations with the people that is around you and support you. And the main question that I've got of this is like, what I can't live without.
Yep.
It's like, you know, because when we had to evacuate, I took my wedding photos, a couple of toys, and you know, that was important. But it's not that I can't live without.
Yeah.
So that is I think.
So now you think about, okay, if I had to leave, they're really important to me. Do I need to get them done digitally? So that they can be in a small box to take rather than the albums, you know, like.
Yes, so, but you know,
that's right.
That's right. Because it's when you don't have a plan that you don't know what to do because you're under stress.
Yeah.
So when you have a plan, you just know what to do.
And you follow the system and you follow the, you know, your needs and what you need. And then it's a much better outcome.
When you are panicking, it's like you can't consciously think straight.
Well, no, and that's exactly, you know, not everybody's built for that.
Yeah.
Like not everybody does well under those kinds of, you know, lots of people don't. I don't.
Yeah. No.
But, you know, if you think about it and you're prepared, then you're going to have a much better outcome. As, you know, I don't know how many times I can say it. It's just please have a plan. Please have a plan. Start planning and communicate it out. Yeah.
We're going to be getting emails when you got your plan ready.
Yeah. We're going to send an email
Dear
to everyone.
Where's your plan? But it is really important. And you know, even like when to go. You know, I often have conversations with people who rely on public transport or taxis or their support workers coming to get them. Well, if an evacuation's being declared and people can't get into you, or if your support worker lives near you but maybe has a family, you know,
exactly.
What's your plan? So really, maybe you want to be thinking about when it's watch and act is when we might need to move, those kinds of things. So, there's so much. We could unpack it for hours, but...
No.
And like you said, it's all down to the person and what they need.
It's so individual. So individual.
So we're definitely gonna review our plans and put all the information there. We're gonna send an email to everyone that we have in our lists. And with the information, because it's really important.
It's hugely important.
Yeah.
And you know, think about it isn't just those big things like fires and floods. And it's little things too.
Yeah. All right. Thank you so much.
That's all right.
Claire. Thank you for.
Sorry you didn't get a word in.
Really interesting though. My brain's just going 100 miles an hour
exactly.
now.
Yeah. So you are the only one who, you know, whose brain is not 100 miles an hour. So what would be the last message?
The last message: don't put it off.
Yeah.
Don't put it off. Now is the time to be preparing. You know, there's no such thing as high seasons anymore. You know, the world is changing, and emergencies. You know, if you think about it, outside of the big ones, you know, storms are coming. It's winter. You know, floods, mini floods, whatever. It doesn't matter. There's no time like the present, and don't get complacent if you live in a metro area because it can happen to anyone.
Yeah.
So start now.
Expect the unexpected.
And if you start now and you start small steps, it's not so overwhelming. So please start now.
All right. You heard.
Yes. Start now. Start now.
Start now. Make a plan.
Yes. All right. Thank you again.
No, thanks for having me.
And we'll have you again at any time.
Oh, there's a few topics that we can go over there.
Just a few.
Yes.
Very interesting.
Yeah. All right. Thank you, everyone. If you have any questions, you know that you can email us at beyond@bloomingsupports.com.au, even though we're going to put all the information so it's going to be accessible for everyone. And yes, make your plan.
Start today.
Yeah. Bye.
To watch the Person-Centered Emergency Preparedness webinar presented by Clare Gibellini, follow the link in the description.